Welcome everybody to this week's video, and I want to look into the idea of how Reiki can help us in these turbulent times. I'm not going to go into the politics of the world at the moment. I'm not going to go into how this might be affecting people. I just want it to be an investigation onto you and how our practice, not even just of Reiki, but our practice of turning inward might be where the peace and the salvation in these turbulent times can be found in the self. It's a big topic. You can obviously see even how I'm talking about it. I don't want to downplay the gravity of where we are in the world, but where we have to remember we actually are is we are actually in ourself, right? We are actually in our being, our mind, and our body. And the practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho helps us to remember this. It helps us to remember that we need to cultivate an internal space of peace, an internal space of stillness, an internal ethos that follows the precepts, right? Koyodake wa ikaruna, shinpai suna, kanshashite, gyo hagime, hito ni shinsetsu ni. So what are these 5 precepts, and what is it about this internal space that they cultivate? Well, we know the precepts. If you are a Reiki practitioner, new to Reiki, maybe you've just done your level 1, you would have heard these, or if you're obviously working with Reiki for a long time, you know what the precepts are. If you've never heard them before, they are, I think I'm just loosely translating them because sometimes they can be translated in all manner of ways, but they are: just for today I will not anger, just for today I will not worry, just for today I will be grateful, just for today I will be kind to all things, and just for today I will be honest or honest in my work. Again, there's flexibility in how that can be translated. But what does that mean? And what's the point here? Through all turbulence in our life, if we can work to calm down the anger and the worry within us, then our circumstance becomes one of peace, right? See, we react in viciousness with our anger and our anxiety or our worry. We are guided by our toxic emotions or our state of disbalance when those first 2 precepts are taken control of our life. Now, again, the gravity of today, the gravity of every day for populations around the world, to be fair. I'm not trying to put that in light circumstances. But what I do want to iterate here is the ownership or the ability to control one's internal space. Indeed, that's the only thing that we really have ownership or control over, right? And so if we are acting from worry or anger, then we are going to respond via worry and anger. If we are acting from peace, honesty, love, and kindness, then our actions are going to be reflected as such. In Usui Reiki Ryoho, and not just in Reiki, but in Japanese society as a whole, there's a very important concept called the kokoro. And the kokoro is this idea of the spirit or the heart mind. And this is a really important concept to understand as we navigate that internal space, likely an internal space that is kind of burdened by anger and burdened by worry, burdened by anxiety and fear and frustration, and all the tangential emotions that come from those 2 first precepts being out of whack, anger and worry. See, if we have an internal space that is attached or governed or led by those 2 emotions, anger and worry, then we will constantly have a heart mind or a spirit that is in fight or flight. We will have a ethos of ourself that is never in balance, never at rest, right? And I think that this idea of our kokoro is something that we can all maybe find a little bit of peace in, especially in these times. If we turn into the self and we recognize the movement of our emotions in our physical body, and we recognize the connection between, for example, in Usui Reiki Ryoho, I think it's so beautiful that the three diamonds are talked about and taught as they are. If you don't know about the three diamonds, we have the universal diamond, which is the top three chakras, if you'd like to call it like those. So the crown, the third eye, and the throat. And then we have the heart center. So that would be the heart diamond or the heart energy. So that's just the heart chakra. And then we have the earth energy, which would be the solar plexus, the sacral, and the root chakra. And I think there's something really beautiful here, because remember, the term kokoro is this heart mind, right? Now, what is it about this heart and mind that is interesting here? Well, if we look and we kind of distill this idea down, or we break it apart a little bit deeper and explore it a little bit deeper about how our physical body represents our emotional state, we might be able to see a really beautiful connection here. A connection that can help us understand a destabilized state or a state that's at balance or at peace. So from a Chinese medicine perspective, we hold a lot of our toxic emotions in the lower three chakras, okay? And so let me give an example of that. The two that I'm going to focus on here, because it's just for the brevity of this video, again, are going to be anger and worry. Now, worry is a manifestation of fear. So anger is held in the liver, which is in the solar plexus, and then fear is manifested in the kidneys, which would be part of the sacral or the hara. Now, notice that all of those are in the lower diamond. They're in the earth energy. And if we look at the physiology and the anatomy of our being, we have, of course, our diaphragm. And our diaphragm, in a Chinese medicine perspective, is literally called the doorway to anxiety, or it's referred to as this, right? And we have kind of this governing switch, or this bridge, this barrier, with those emotions being compressed into the lower part of the body, and then it being kind of withheld between the heart and the mind. You know, when we hear a lot, we have a lot of statements, at least in the West, you know, I'm from the States, from the United States, so we have a lot of these types of statements that we are fueled by anger, or that our heart is burning with pain. We quite often express anger and worry in our heart center. And what's going on here? Well, this is a destabilization or a disbalance of our kokoro, our heart mind, and our spirit, right? Remember, our mind is where all of our emotional state is processed and interpreted and framed in our context of belief, okay? So it's almost as if we have this diaphragmatic bridge or barrier between where we're holding those emotions. And when we panic, right, when we're in a state of fight or flight, the diaphragm becomes very porous. We're breathing very quickly and so on. And there is a movement of these energies through the body. You know, we can become, here's a great example of it. When somebody becomes angry, we say that they get hot-headed, right? Or that they turn red in the face. The same thing when we are very anxious, we get nervous, we get heart palpitations, and we start to feel as if those emotions are rising up through the body, right? And so what does this all have to do with our kokoro? Well, if we look at the state of our being, and we recognize the practice of Usui Reiki Ryoho, or the practice, more importantly, of turning in, then we have to recognize our necessity or the importance of turning into the full self to cultivate a body that is not angry and not worrying. If we are free of anger and we're free of worry, then what happens to our kokoro? Our kokoro recognizes our entire being. It's not just our heart and mind, it's our spirit. It's, some ways it's talked about as the manifestation of all three diamonds, or our true self, right? And so if we have our earth center, our lower diamond, or from a yogic perspective, or maybe a more Western perspective, our lower three chakras that are all about survival and stability and our ego and reproduction and all of the things that they represent. If we are able to cultivate an internal practice that works on our kokoro, works on our whole spirit, right? The shin inside of us, which is our spirit or our energy. If it works to balance is a loaded term, so I don't mean it like that. I mean, it works to be at peace with all aspects of our being. Then our energy centers in our body are able to move, right? We are not feeling that hot-headed anger. We're not responding with clouded vision that we can get when we are angry or when we're worrying, right? And we all know that the worst time to make any decisions is when you're angry or when you're worried, right? Because from those two expressions of emotional states, all bad decisions come. And we can extrapolate that then out to the rest of the world. You know, we don't have to look any further than all of the major religions to see this exact same story playing out. The ideas of forgiveness, the ideas of turning in and working on yourself so that you are at peace. If everybody did this, right? If everybody's kokoro was where we put our attention and our focus, then what would we have to recognize separations from each other? What would we squabble over, right? Now, again, I don't want that to sound like I'm trivializing anything. Obviously, I'm not. These are grand histories that are far too complex to distill down to this statement here in this video. Or are they? Right? Because all of those things are framed in our mind. At some point or another, everything that we are recognizing in the external world is framed in our mind. And so if our mind is busy, then our kokoro is busy, right? From an Usui Reiki Ryoho perspective, we are not recognizing Shinshin Kaizen, the mind and body improvement method of Usui Reiki Ryoho. Notice Shinshin Kaizen is the same thing as our kokoro, our heart mind, right? We are trying to cultivate a space in the self that is at peace. If we can feel that in ourself, then we don't respond to the outside world or the external world with aggression, hostility, anger, violence, hate, all of these types of negative emotions, right? Greed. If we can cultivate a space that is at peace in ourselves, if we can work on our heart mind and turn into ourselves, then under any circumstance, at some point, it's possible for us to find that level of peace. Again, we don't have to look any further than literally every major religion to find this in its texts, right? Every major deity, meaning something like Christ or Allah or the Buddha, whatever it might be, Shiva, Shakti, Ganesh, it doesn't make any difference what they are. Every major deity in every major religion talks about the same practice. Cultivate internal peace in order to recognize external peace, right? So in all of these difficult times, if we have a practice like Reiki or meditation or yoga or mindfulness or walking in the park or cooking or literally whatever it is that helps you find peace in your kokoro, right? Whatever it is that helps you on your journey to find that internal space of stillness, turn into that, right? Turn away from the avenues of toxicity in this world, like the news, like media, like social media, right? Turn away from the aspects that are propagating fear in your life. Turn away from the greed and the lust and the desire of attachment that is so commonplace in society. Let all of those things go and turn back into yourself. Remember, after all, this is where the kingdom of heaven lies. It lies within, right? So if we can turn into the self by whatever modality you see fit, nothing is better than another one. Whatever works for you to sit comfortably, quietly, and at peace with your internal state. If we could all just come to this practice, right, then we might see the ethos or the arch of every major religion. Cultivate peace inside of yourself so that we can recognize it on the external world, right? Perhaps now is the most important time to recognize this. And so perhaps today, perhaps right after watching this video, or whenever you're able, you can turn into your own kokoro. Turn off the TV, turn off the distraction and the noise and the hate and the anger, and turn into yourself and find peace and stillness in yourself, right? Wherever you are, whatever your attachments are, whatever your circumstances, whatever your environment is, see if you can do this. And not everybody can, not at all moments, but when you can cultivate peace and when you can cultivate some stillness inside of yourself, and your kokoro can become your focus of your practice, seek that out, right? This is how we shine the light of Daikomyo, or the light of the universe, onto ourselves. And if we can recognize the light of the universe within ourselves, Christ consciousness, if you would like to call it that, right? Any major direction in religion is talking about this same idea of shining the light of truth and the light of honesty and compassion inside the self. If we can start to cultivate that in ourselves, then we'll shine that light to the rest of the world, right? And peace and happiness and compassion and love and balance, they can become as infectious as toxicity, violence, anger, war, greed, and suffering. We just have to make a choice to turn inward to the self. Maybe we don't do that because we think it's daunting. Maybe we don't do that because we think it's impossible. All you have to do is try, even if it's just for one breath. Close your eyes, turn into the self. Shine that light of compassion onto your own being and into your own self. And let that light propagate inside. Find that peace and stillness inside, right? This is how we heal the planet. This is how we heal ourselves. This is how we heal our own kokoro. So, smile onto your kokoro, everybody. Smile into yourself. Smile into yourself with compassion and with the light of the universe. And may all beings be at peace. As always, everybody, thank you so much, and In Gassho to all.